introduce the two guests that have just come up and joined us. So on my right over here, we have Sean Puckett, who is a Montana native and lives in Helena with his two kids and his wife. And Sean has been working at the cross-section of investments with and ranching for the past 6 years. And he is the co-founder of Ranchland Capital Partners. To my left, I have Annalyn Lavey, who comes here today from her home in Idaho. Her partner has some amazing, beautiful jewelry. It's called Hell's Canyon Bolo Company that I got to see online the other day and is here. And so you guys should go check out his booth. And Annalyn is the founder and managing partner for Genus Lands. And so as Cole introduced, one of the things that all of us, of course, have to wrestle with is how do we build local and regional economies? And then also what the rapid change that is happening around us, and how do we exist or work in both of those worlds? And where do we choose to work and focus to impact that change? And so when I've talked with both Sean and Annalyn, one of the things we've talked about is right now, 96% of ranches are family owned and have been for multiple generations. Yet the average age of our farmers and ranchers is 65. And due to multiple challenges that we're going to discuss here on the stage, many of those families where the farmers and ranchers are 65 years old do not have a succession plan where they either have children who want to or can afford to step into that land. So we're on the edge of a giant wealth and land transfer. And what do we do about that? And so I'm going to ask our first two questions to Sean and Annalyn to help give us some context to the time that we're in and the reason, and also to explain the model that they're working in given these times. And so Sean, I'd love to have you kick us off. And your team has put together a lot of really interesting research and important research on the changing landscape of ranch ownership. And I would love for you to set some context for us around who currently is owning land and what you all are seeing is happening around us.
Does this work? Doesn't work. I'll use this one. So who knows how many acres of rangeland are in the United States? Anybody else?
Some brave guesses. Call it out.
Just guess. Okay, call it 450 million acres of rangeland in the United States. And so when she says 96% of that is current family owned, also 96% of that acreage is going to change hands in the next 30 years if you look at the average age of the owners of that land. So when we started Ranchland Capital Partners, we wanted to answer the question, who's going to own that land? And I don't think if some of that or a portion's not changing hands to the next generation, then you're talking about outside investors or landowners buying that land. And you can go on Montana Land Source right now and see there's $2 billion worth of ranchland acreage just in Montana for sale. So ranches will be for sale. It's going to change hands. There's not going to be as much family ownership. So our company is trying to answer that question by blending the culture that you guys talked about with investment. And you can't build a company like that unless you have the ranching community and that DNA embedded inside of the company. Otherwise, it just becomes a hedge fund or some other group that's not aligned with the incentives of the land. So we had a ranch management company built with Todd Graham, who's been doing this for 30 years and stewarding land with ecosystem-friendly practices and improving ecological function. And he's building the team that's actually making the decisions of what happens with that land, who works on that land, and how it's stewarded. My role in the company is how do you combine that with giving investors a return on investment, which in that land ownership model you have to do. So I think I could stop there, but it's the local communities and eating local, I think, is a great thing. And Cole and I have been talking about this for 6 years. But still, if everyone in Montana ate a quarter beef a year, that's only 250,000 head of cattle. And that's maybe 15% of what we produce as a state. So.
I gave this to you, but I'm going to take it back for a moment. Thank you, Sean. And Annalyn, I'd love to give you an opportunity to think about where your work intersects with this, but also expand upon when you and I talk. We also talk about a huge amount of wealth transfer that is happening alongside the huge amount of land transfer. And that we, for a while now, have been talking about this land transfer happening in the next 20 to 30 years. But because of a number of different factors that are going on in our current times, we're thinking about that as actually speeding up. And so I'd love to have you frame that out for us a little bit.
Thank you. And it's such an honor to be on this stage. And I think your father's words have definitely caught me. And so I've built my career around working on that book. So thank you. So to give a bigger picture of the wealth transfer that's coming our way, we call it the silver tsunami. It's over $80 trillion that are going to be changing hands. That estimated time period is anywhere between 20 to 40 years. Inside of that is embedded 1.2 trillion acres of land. And that succession is going to hit tax implications and numerous hands before it gets passed on. And this is a question that we need to ask in every bioregion and every family is how are we preparing for this moment? The land succession is looking at perhaps a quicker timeline, as you're alluding to, with different climate impacts and geopolitical impacts. The farmers that want to stay in the game may not be able to, so the next time they have a bunker year, I'm hearing they're getting out. And that's typically when I get a phone call. So I've been working with ultra-high net worth family offices and financial firms for most of my career. I've done indoor ag and outdoor ag, and now Genus lands I've formed to work with regional agroforestry and land management groups that are proven land stewards to prime them for investment, both on the process finance side and the project finance side. I define project finance as within the farm gate, and process finance being much more that community infrastructure that's needed. So we started with 2 projects, one in Mexico City and another in Wallace, Kansas. Julie is sitting right there. So I hope we talk together about the work we're doing there. But yeah, so it's priming the people on the ground to have those conversations and meet them so that, it's not just a matter of, taking that bid from the developer next door when they fold, and making sure they're ready for that conversation and have their option.
Wonderful. And Annalyn, I know that what you're doing is very new and it's exciting in terms of that you founded this group recently. And so that you're in a place where you're going to be sharing more and more as you can as projects come out. But could you share with us what your vision is in 20 years for what you hope your group's work will look like and the types of impact, the types of land transitions that you will be helping with?
I was thinking about that when you were talking on stage. So agroforestry and diversified sustenance farming practices can be done in quite a small group of land, actually. I've done it in cities, I've done it in New York City, I've done it in Lisbon, and there's so many forms of doing it. I'm doing it in Boise at our community garden, and then with a woman who feeds 4 families off of her plots. It's very, very small plots, but she's doing it. And I think we need to combine that, enabling that system with restoring grasslands at scale, and making that something that is enabling natural carbon cycling and water infiltration back into our aquifer systems. So that's the world we're building for, and those are the projects we're looking to partner with.
Thank you. And Sean, I'd love to ask you the same question of just thinking about your work here in Montana and what you all hope in 20 years, in 15 years, what the vision is for the scale that you're working at or who you're working with or how that, unfolds as these land transitions are happening.
Yeah, I hope there's more models like ours, because we're focused on large ranches, right? We can't. It's hard to build a model like ours around pursuing smaller ranches. When I say large, the USDA defines it as 500 animal units or more, which can be 10,000 acres, 25,000 acres, depends on where you're at in the West. But I think part of the issue, going back to these lands changing hands and there's going to be new ownership, is you reference the money economy. And when you have investors buying ranches, they eventually need that capital back. That's the challenge with this new ownership model. And I think it would be interesting to see what I hope happens is that there's more public ownership of these private lands. Like when they change hands to an investor and they need to have a liquidity event where that ranch gets sold to get their capital back, who's buying it that next round, right? Because you need that appreciation in land value to get the returns that capital would need. That's the challenge that I see with any model. It's not family owned, but I think that's also the opportunity. And I think that's where if we can build in the DNA of that land ownership transfer to be people that understand the land, they want to take care of it, they understand communities, and they bring up the same cultural values that have been around them. I think you can't have it one way or the other at all. When they get you, if you have groups that are buying the land and they're detached from that side of it, I think there's a very strong misalignment of incentives, and I would like to see more models allowing smaller ranchers to get into ranching where they don't necessarily have to own the land, but they can build into that ownership all the time. That's not our model, and that's not how we're set up, but I hope that that evolves over time.
Do you see anyone working on that? Are there groups? I hear talk of it, but I don't see someone practicing it.
I know a few nonprofits that are doing that, where they're getting younger ranchers into ranching, but that's hard because now you're talking about ranchers donating their ranches, right, as a form of transition. And I haven't seen anyone talking about this land ownership transfer and who's going to own that land a lot. I just don't see very many models out there to try and solve that. So that's a hard one.
So say Annalyn and Mary, I'd love to hear just within your work and where you are, you see successful examples. I know, I'm sorry, we're going to have to keep juggling these microphones.
Go ahead. Well, I'm excited to say that we're working on this in Mexico City. And it's, actually really inspired by a trip I had to Kentucky and a conversation I had with someone who works for the Berry Center, because there's creating partnerships with universities, and we need to be building vocational training. There's a large gap between the educational system and actual paid labor right now, and it's widening. I was just sitting with an economist and a researcher studying this, and those pathways for that vocational training needs to be built. And not only do they need to be built, but there needs to be somewhere for those people to go. And there needs to be an equitable way, and a dignified way for those people to earn into the work that they're devoting their life to. And so that's something that we focus on, and we're hoping to focus on with more projects and groups in the United States that have proven that model and have people graduating through vocational training. And there are people talking about this, but it's fewer than you would hope.
Can you share a little bit about Mexico City, of how you all are doing that there, or whatever you can share?
So there is an area in Mexico City that there is a number of farmers that are transacting because they're combating poverty. And so they're selling to anybody who they can sell to, but those lands are getting left behind or developed. And so it's the last kind of the lungs and heart of Mexico City, and a number of large family offices are starting to look at how to support that, but in a way that allows for those people to buy that land back. And so we're looking at a number of different financial models and tools that allows for that to happen. But the thing about this place is that it's actually not owned by anyone, which I appreciate. It has a culture that holds that ownership. So you have to know and see that person loving and caring for that land for them to keep it. And they have a very informal way of acknowledging that. So the tools that have to be used are actually more akin to that of how to manage ocean.
Thank you. So Sean, you answered part of this question, which I appreciate. You jumped into my next question. Thank you. But I wanted to ask all of us about what is something that we are wrestling with in the current model that we have chosen to work with to address, change in the system that we're trying to work with. And so you just mentioned one of those, which I appreciate. So this is an invitation for you to add on to that. Or Mary, maybe I'll start with you with this question of what is something that you're wrestling with the current model, the current scale, the current focus that you're working on?
I think that for our home place meeting, we have 4 principal programs at the Berry Center. We have an education program called the Farm and Forest Institute, which I think you must talk to Leah, who runs it. We have the archives and agrarian lecture series and so on. We have a bookstore and rural reading programs, and we have our home place meet. Our home place meet is by far the biggest challenge. It's also, I don't think its satisfactions are great because, for instance, a young farmer that we've been working with for a long time, and by a long time, I mean like 6 years. He came to my office recently and said he was going to quit his full-time job at a factory, one of the power plants on the Ohio River. I mean, one of the things we didn't talk about is the fact that most farmers are working full-time somewhere else for the right to farm. He was quitting his job because of the work. He's been working with us, and because of some of the things that working with us has introduced him to, the possibility that he could do some things that he hadn't thought about before. And cattle prices are sky high. I expect you all are aware of this. This is my husband's a cattle farmer. This is wonderful in its way, and it is a big challenge for our home place meet. So we're going to see it through, and we are seeing it through, but that has been a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think language is a big challenge because I've had to go into skyscrapers and learn what they're talking about in New York and learn what's going on with the technology in San Francisco. And there's some thinking around natural capital now. I think 198 different forms of commoditizing land, water, wildlife for trade. And I was asked a question recently because I think there is this question of how much is enough? And that the question was, do you think that we need to have the first billionaire off of natural capital? Like, is there such a thing as a natural capital billionaire? And I struggle with the answer to that question.
I don't. But go ahead.
No, I don't want to, but I think...
What kind of goal is that?
I don't want to, for sure. Yeah, the wave of land coming, the wave of land that's going to succeed is so big that it's likely going to happen, whether we want it to or not. And so, yeah, it's something that I think about it and think about where I want to stand in that equation.
I had to say a word about what we're after. And, these things are going to happen. I mean, we've got a first trillionaire now. That's a deeply moving and wonderful news to all of us. But I want to say that we won't protect or keep anything that we have to have without, first of all, a change in the way we think, and in the change in what we think we have to have, what gives us pleasure, what makes us content and happy. We have one given life. How are we going to spend it? What are we going to use it for? So there's that. And that's got to come out of that's got to step away from a paper economy to be meaningful, I think. The second thing is there's a lot, in Kentucky, there's a lot of work on saving farmland. Who is not for that? But it's got to be coupled with saving farmers. It's got to be coupled with saving the people who have the knowledge it takes to farm. And it's got to be coupled with working toward an economy that will allow farmers to make a living farming. And so I see too little work there, too little talk about parity. These are economic principles that I think need to be talked about. Now, the things that you all are working on, I am not in any way, I don't know enough to even probably have a conversation about it. But I do know, I'm going to tell you the things I think I know for sure. And we've got to work on farmers being able to afford to farm. And these people in skyscrapers, these people with all the power, they can't do anything for themselves. It's nothing for themselves. It's a terrible thing. So we need to change. We've got to change our culture, not just our economy, but our culture. And that culture has got to start. My father said it at the end. That's not the unsettling of America. Said it in the unsettling of America. It's a crisis of culture, a crisis of character, and we can change ourselves, and then we can change more. So.
Do you want to answer that question?
Well, I'll share, because I think it's on this question of change, is that I have spent time working in different parts of food and agriculture. And most recently, I've not always lived on a horse and ridden across the country and gotten to talk to people and interview people. But in my most recent position, I was the president of the company working in agriculture and food systems. And we were doing work that is really important and was really important. And I totally burned myself out. And I don't know how to do all the different bits of important work and to not burn ourselves out. And how to not burn out our farmers, how to not burn out the different people working on solutions and ideas. And one of the reasons I reached for the reins of my horse was that I knew I needed to slow down and I needed to reconnect with the parts of our land and the people doing deeply good work, because I know that's where my hope comes from. And so as I rode, I talked with farmers and ranchers and land stewards and all sorts of different types of people. I rode through public land, I got permission to ride through private land, I rode through wilderness areas. And whenever I rode on dirt roads, people would pull over and ask me what I was doing. And time after again, someone would pull over, we'd talk, and they'd say, well, my ranch is 8 miles down the road, and you've got to stop there. We really want to talk more. This is super important. And we're out harvesting right now, so we're not going to be back till like 10 p.m. at night, but the back door is open. There's a truck in the driveway. It probably has keys in it, and if it doesn't, there's keys probably in the kitchen counter. So you take that, and if you need to get groceries, you do that. Put your horses in the corral, set up the tent wherever you want, use a shower, don't know if there's clean towels, probably doesn't matter to you. And, when we get home, let's make dinner and let's talk. And people, time after again, opened their homes to me and were so generous about their lives, their stories. And I, every single day, woke up so inspired. And continue to be inspired of this is such an important land and people and food system. And I had lost sight of that when I was behind my computer and at my desk. And one of my biggest challenges in the model that I'm choosing to work in this moment is, how do I translate that? Or how do I honor these stories of these people that gave me their stories? And we all can't just get on horses every moment we get burned out and go ride across the country. And so how do I use this and share this with people? And thinking about the things that we need to do when we're burned out and how we find hope and how we do that in small, simple ways and sometimes big, explosive ways when we blow up our lives and leave our jobs. And is something that I've just been doing a lot of thinking about, the work that I'm doing, that I was and hope to do in the future, and that I'm doing now, of how do we take care of each other and nurture each other. Culture is such an important part of that. I think storytelling is such an important part of that. I think what Cole and Old Salt and the Mannix family and all the partners are doing is such an important part of that. And the fact that that group of people can get this many people to come to a remote place at a cell phone service to talk and to listen and to learn, that gives me hope. But then how do we bring the energy and the hope that we find here out to that larger population of people? Now, I don't know how to do that.
Well, I think you just got to take it home and go to work.
Yeah.
And I think that also the way you don't burn out is that you have as much fun as possible, which must have something to do with this festival. Daddy has been writing for 70 years or so. He's, as he says, sometimes his work is failed. His books are great, but, we've been losing farmland steadily as long as he's been writing. But on the other hand, he says he's enjoyed his work. He's enjoyed every day of his life. And I think that's another thing that's a matter of scale.
Sean, do you want to answer this question?
I think for us, or for me, it took me 29 years to wake up to what's actually important, which is why I left wealth management and to pursue this company where I could come sit on these kinds of landscapes and actually enjoy what I'm doing versus sitting in a cubicle or a box, concrete jungle, trying to figure out how to make people money. And I think that's been the most rewarding part, but the most frustrating and challenging part of our model is now we do have to make a return on investment. So it's not just about the romance of the land and keeping it in communities. It's now I got to have conversations with family offices about why 10% annualized is not enough. And how do you make more money on ranches to make it more palatable from an investment standpoint? And I think the frustrating part is that people don't get it. They don't understand. You don't need a 50% rate of return if you're also protecting ecosystems and landscapes. There should be some give there. And if it's a small piece of a portfolio, it's not like you're giving up a lot. So I think I've heard a lot about impact investors and people doing things with the right, incentives. I've yet to come across groups that actually walk that walk. And I think that's been the most challenging part, is it all comes down to return on investment. Even if they say they care about impact, even if they say, yeah, they want to do things for the right reasons, I think truly, you can do that for 2 or 3 years, but then the calls will come. Where's the cash flow? Where's the investment? How can you generate more return? And for me, that's not why I did this. And that's been the most frustrating part of our models. How do you tell investors you don't need as high of a return because of the importance of what we're trying to do? And it's just not landing yet.
I want to come in with a little bit of hope. I can't really talk too much about it because there's a lot of paperwork involved. But there's a risk associated with where we've taken our land in the commodity game. And the people holding that risk are the reinsurance companies. And there's not that many of them. And they're talking about how to reprice risk. And now we have technology that's going to help them understand how to do that a little bit better. And so that's another reason why I think we need to get prepared to work together, because that repricing of risk will take into consideration ecological restoration and how to create a service industry to service that need.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask us one more question about what is something, a topic, a question that you wish people would ask you more often, and how would you begin to answer it? And I'm thinking about a question about land, food, farming, community, about the different worlds that we're working in. And especially when you think about what people are concerned about, or the types of questions people normally ask you, what do you wish, where the conversation would go? Or a different perspective, a different lens, if you were able to inspire a different type of question.
I feel really grateful to have found my partner, who is a mushroom forager and a 4th generation rock heron from Idaho. Super grounded. And a question that I would like to hear people talking about is just trading the produce they're growing, trading seeds in cities and beyond cities. And it's been nice to be in Boise and doing that, in addition to the bigger macro scale work that I've been doing. But those small questions matter, as well as, I had a good one the other day, was what are you disillusioned by? And what are you doing about it?
So what do I wish people would ask me more often?
Yeah, or a question, or different, or because we get to ask the same questions, or people get stuck on the same things. And is there something about the work that you're doing, or the lens that you're looking at around these issues?
Yeah, I wish capital markets would start talking about the issues and not the return on investment. Again, it's how do you solve this problem without having to squeeze every last, dollar out of it? I think that's the challenge that will be faced. And I think the people who figure out how to answer that question correctly and transition land to people and not necessarily institutions, that's where I would like to see the conversation going. And that requires technology, acceptance, involvement, politics, government involvement. It involves a lot of things to make that a reality. But I don't really see any other way it ends in a good scenario. Not to be a downer, but...
It also involves dance and poetry and spoken word and a lot of amazing things. That's how the knowledge of how land management has been passed down through generations. So there's the other side of that coin too.
I was recently asked what I ate for breakfast when I was a child. I've been asked so many questions. It's hard for me to think about. I guess I wish that it was more, that I could hear from people's questions more often, that they understand that we can't just talk about land and how we love nature and so on, that we have to couple it with the people and with the culture that will keep it.
Right.
And this is a total dodge of your actual question, but I wish that people would ask me more about that so I could talk more about it without just taking their questions and turning it into what I want to talk about.
You've done a very good job of that in this moment, so excellently done. We have time for 2 questions. I don't know if there's any from this conversation that people have been hearing, if there's any sparks, and if not, we'll move on. But I want to give an opportunity to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions or inspirations.
So how do we get to where people attach value to things other than money when we're talking about return on investment? Returns doesn't, if people could see the return of their investment in a way outside of just the dollars, the people, the land, the different things, how do we change that conversation, right? Because it's always all around money, right? And that's part of the problem. So how do we, that's a culture change, right? And what do we give on?
I think that's a fundamental shift in the way the American economy functions. So, a total collapse.
Okay.
Maybe. I think it requires a paradigm shift in how people value things, to Mary's point. It's what do we actually value? And if it's culture and family and land and stewardship and healthy food, and I think people maybe will be okay not focused on consumer goods and things that are driving inflation and the consumer economy, and more on what actually matters. I think if that happened, that would be a shift in the right direction.
I think our main problem now is that there's too much food. So it's the last thing on people's minds. If there was, the minute it gets scarce, it will be the first thing on people's minds. But we would like, those of us who love other people and love people younger than ourselves, would like to not get to that point. So what we would like to do is come up under what's coming apart with something solid. So I think that's how I think of our work at the Berry Center. I think that's how a lot of people who are working on these things think about this. So I don't think there's much doubt that industrial agriculture is in its death throes. I don't know how long it'll take for it to come apart. It's going to take a while. And how much damage it'll do, a lot. But things aren't changing. So we want to work on something solid. And I think we might need to think a little bit. There's so few of us, and I could be dead wrong about this, but I think we need to think pretty hard about where we're working, what we're working on. And this is not to fault anyone. That's the truth. But I do know that I got sick to death of hearing, when I was farming full-time, and my husband's a full-time farmer still, I got sick of listening to educating the consumer. I mean, we have educated the consumer until, so much time has gone into educating the consumer. Of course that's important. I'm not going to say that the consumer shouldn't be educated, but at the same time, nobody's working on an economy that will support farmers. And so farmers are going out of business faster and faster and faster. So I think as to Daddy's quotation about it is the impeded stream that sings, I think we've avoided some of the difficult work and kind of shifted towards some of the easier work. I think that's something that probably we all need to think about. Maybe not here, but I think we need to think about that some. Yeah, but that probably was not a good thing to say, but I already said it.
I think where we focus our time is really important right now, and making sure that we are returning quality. I was re-listening to the Unsettling of America on the way here. I was speaking with a ninth generation ranching family who lost their ranch in one night in the Mexican Revolution, and a fifth generation rancher who had restored ecosystems in Idaho. And that landless ninth generation rancher is likely going to partner to buy the additional acres next to that fifth generation rancher, and then work with first generation ranchers of the University of Idaho. So I think this is multi-generational, interdimensional, and just finding people you want to be around for a while. So that's my answer to that question.
I'll answer along the big and the small shifts that need to happen. During my ride last year, I spent time with a cow calf operation not that far away from here. And the rancher was talking to me about how after the country of origin labeling was taken away, they started getting $1 less per pound per calf. And so on a semi-truck, when they sold their calves, that semi-truck was carrying about 60,000 pounds of calves. And so that's $60,000 that they were no longer getting. And the industry won't point to, that labeling or taking away as the result of that dollar less. But when we talk about competition and where there's power or negotiation, that Ranger can trace it to that moment. And so there are lots of different types of shifts and systems, but just thinking about where information is and where it isn't, and who has power to negotiate and who doesn't, that's also very important. We have another question right here.
Thank you. This was such an inspirational talk. I have a question from, I guess, as someone that lives in a city and apart from, I guess, educating the consumer, which you've done already, how can we drive?
I didn't mean we finished. But anyway, okay.
I'm just wondering, what's the missing piece to really drive consumer demand? Maybe there's not really an answer, and is there something that we, young people that live in cities can help with that?
I'm going to start that with not exactly an answer, but the consumer demand has been met. That's our problem. Industrial organics, for instance, could move a lot faster than farm culture could move. And so we have grocery stores full of organic everything. The consumer we need to think about land use. I mean, I don't know why food has been a kind of a not deep enough subject, but it hasn't been, because it hasn't been coupled with land use. It hasn't been coupled with farming and farm people and farm culture. It's just produced a nation of people who are a lot of people who think they want organic food, and that's enough. So I'll stop there, but I maybe that's where people your age can step in and begin to really understand what's involved here, that it's a whole. It's not just little pieces here and there. And it's not, I mean, we have convinced people that their individual self is the most important thing in the entire world, that we all need everything we want when we want it, and we need to be healthy and young and beautiful, and it's all very selfish, honestly. So we need to open up, and I think a lot of things need to get smaller, but maybe that needs to get bigger.
So one thing I learned when I was working with some ultra-high net worth family offices and guilt-ridden technologists was that where my money sleeps matters. So, understanding where you're banking and understanding how you can diversify your own portfolio of capital, whether it's big or small. I mean, the investment group that helped Cole launch Old Salt can take investments from people that are $1,200, and you can be supporting this work. I don't see it as just a consumer packaged goods or a consumer problem. It's definitely a broader economic issue. And so that's something that we need to push on our institutions and our banks to be asking for those tools. Anybody with a 401k, anybody with a DAF can go and request that they see these investment opportunities, and you can look for an adjusted rate of return and ask for that return profile and balance your portfolio accordingly.
See if there's any other burning questions. Okay, so we're going to take a moment to pause, and we're going to just break up into small groups, because one of the goals for this final part of today is giving us a chance to connect with each other, especially thinking that we then will go from this afternoon into these next many inspired days, and the energy and questions that we take into those days is important. and giving you all a chance just to connect with some of the people in here that you do not yet know. And so I'm going to ask for 10 volunteers to raise your hands, and all you're going to do by raising your hand is make sure that you have a group of 10 to 15, maybe 10 to 12 people around you that you're going to circle up, so you're not in any sort of share out role or facilitator. You're just in charge of getting 10 other people around you. So could I have 10 people raise their hands? I've got a 1. I'm going to look you in the eye. 2. Maybe you can stand up once I've called you. 3, 4, 5. 5. Yes. You're going to, yeah. 6, 7, 8, 9 in the back. And maybe 1 more. Maybe 10. And so roughly, so here, the rough goal is we're just going to take probably like 20 minutes. And if everyone in this room could go to one of the people standing up, and each of the people standing up, if you could kind of like spread out around the tent. And the goal is for you to just share your name, where you come from, and something that you're here, that you're hoping to learn, something that you're excited about. And part of this, again, is just to connect us with each other. And so each of the people who raised their hands, try to gather 10-ish people around you and see how this works. And you can sit out on the grass, you can sit on the hay bales. And again, this is just going to be 20 minutes. And I will call us back when it's time to come back. I would just love to hear any brave volunteers who are willing to share just something they learned, or something surprising, or something exciting, or something, what was something that you heard from someone else that you want to share out? A question, someone coming from a really interesting place.
Well, actually, I was really excited to see someone who has hope. Because I am like on the internet, and it's just soul crushing. And so it's just so refreshing.
Thank you for that.
A lot of why I have hope is because I've walked across the country 5 times. And I don't have a smartphone. So that's a lot of it. Because what I see is what I see with myself when I'm out there walking, not what is shown to me by design. So that's so much of it for me.
Yeah, I want to snap for that one. Thank you for that, for sharing that hope. What else? Other seeds that were planted, inspiration, things you're taking into these next couple days. So all the other circles, you guys just sat and stared at each other, you didn't talk.
Really bad names. Where is he gone? Accountant for Old Salt? Where is he gone? Who's the accountant for Old Salt called? Phil, that was it, Phil. So Phil basically has told us that he was working in big tech, and he decided that he was working for a startup of Elon Musk's company, and he decided that was not serving him, and he came on a whim to Old Salt to help them with their accounting, and got completely drawn in by Cole, understandably, and by Old Salt, understandably. And I just think that was a really beautiful thing to share with us, is that you were saying about what can we all do as individuals, and I guess that's just not to stay in things that don't serve you, and to make those individual actions, like keeping your money in place where you think it'll grow into something positive, and changing your direction of life when it doesn't serve what you're trying to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. What else? I'd love to hear a couple more.
Can I?
There were a couple people in our group talking about working with hides and organ meats and trying to help ranchers solve those problems. I can't believe I just said ranchers. So I'm from Kentucky, and so we're farmers, and that's one thing I've noticed being here in that circle is it really is a different culture here than over in Kentucky. And so just hearing that people, when Mary said that it shouldn't be up to the farmers to solve all this, like other smart people can help us solve some of these problems, it just gave me a lot of hope that people are caring about the hides and the organ meats and trying to solve that problem, because I've gone down that rabbit hole a few times, but when you're trying to farm and do it all, it's hard to get into those nitty-gritty problems. So thank you all for helping solve those problems.
Thank you. There was another hand back there, and I also, did you want to say something?
Well, really quick, I'll just say I was really inspired by a young man in our group who came from a farm in the Midwest, and his father's still farming there. He came out here, I guess, kind of on a whim, or he was inspired by some things that he learned out here. And so I asked him if he talked about this farm that he's working on out here, a regenerative grain farm. And I said, do you speak to your dad? Does he speak to you? And he said, well, he paused. He said, not really. But he said, I can share that he and I had a very deep and personal conversation that came totally out of the blue and unexpected. And he said, my dad explained to me why he's doing what he's doing. He's playing the farm game, he's doing the chemicals, he's doing the farming, because that's what he has to do to pass it on to my generation and maybe my kids. But we started. We had that conversation. Do I feel like I made any progress? Nope. Is there hope? Maybe. And I just thought that was really exciting that he was willing to share that, and maybe he doesn't have a lot of hope yet, but they're at least talking about it, and there's hope for the future. So, anyone else?
There were a lot of people in my group who were doing what I call creating the conditions for change. And I know that when you do that really well, it can be invisible. And I'm really interested in entering the weekend thinking about how do we sustain that work? How do we make that regenerative in itself? Because it's really a key part of this. Lifting up others. Someone called it human capital. I've been calling it creating capacity. So that's what I'm thinking about. That's what I was noticing in others.
Thanks. We had a real cool group put together, and one of them was a guy, Steven, who's been doing this for like 20 years. And before that, he was worked on Wall Street. He was a financial guy. Decided that's not where he wanted to be, and so he got into things like blueberries. We talked about blueberries, right? And he thought that was going to be a 3-year process, and they're 2 years into it. He's still trying to figure out all these things, which grounds us, I think, with the idea that you got to be in this for the long haul. And then the real cool thing is he brings his daughter on this thing here, right? So his vision, the long haul, extends beyond what he's thinking about. He's passing that down to his daughter. So that's possible, Steve.
To add a little humor to the day, Baxter Black said that willing your ranch or farm to your children is a form of child abuse. And it's somewhat true, but I was living in this valley until 4th grade, and I've never met Cole before, but I see a lot of his grandpa Bert in him. And so if you guys are wondering how he comes by this naturally, his grandpa Bert was one of the finest men I've ever met in my life. He would sit down and talk to you like you were an old man. and he would ask you questions. Well, how's your dad doing this? I'm getting these questions from her when I'm in second, third grade. What's your dad doing here? What's your dad? He made great conversation with a young kid. And there used to be an old bar in town that was like the community center, Elmer's Place. And the reason I'm saying this is because Elmer stocked orange soda because of Burt Annis, and that's one of my favorite drinks. And, so he was just a great guy, and cool you're coming by that so natural. It's and the whole family. It's about all I have to say, but that's where he gets it. It's in his genes. It's not something he's had to work at very hard.
Okay, it's devolving here. That's very kind of you to say. Meriwether, maybe I'll just say, I just feel like I'm very privileged for you to have to curate this conversation for you all to participate. I'm wrestling with this thing about capital has these certain expectations, and then human beings to do work and to get themselves over to something and to stay rooted and committed to a place at a certain point it has its expectations too. And at some point, the question that I keep wrestling with is to what degree are capital's current expectations compatible with the expectations of human beings and the love that it takes to manage anything well, take care of anything well. So I don't have an answer to that, but I feel the need to be able to, I don't think it's probably true that farmers can be asked to solve the problem. And yet we've got to somehow, because we have urban people asking the question, how do I do better? Like when they start to realize that there is an issue, somehow we've got to figure out what do we say to that sincere question. And I don't think any of us can answer it exactly, but it's kind of the reason for this gathering. It's not just producers meeting with producers and not just I guess urban people theorizing about what food should be, but it's trying to have some edge effect where people who are working in agriculture and in food, and then people who care about their place and maybe aren't doing that work, the work of agriculture on a daily basis, meet and break bread together and have some discussions. And so hopefully all this contributes to some further understanding, and as we figure out what the heck to do about it. So I'm grateful for it. It can feel kind of hopeless, but what gives me hope is when I've seen people managing an ecosystem, managing a piece of land in a way that land is at least maintaining, and in some cases getting better over time. So it's possible to grow good food. It's possible to have a relationship to land where basically both humans and land is flourishing. That's thank God that's not true, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't have a lot to worry about. We just gotta wait for the end. So now the question is, how do we remake our marketplace and our economy in a way that can support the people that are actually right on the land? Anyway, I don't need to have the last word, but I wanted to say thank you for curating this conversation, and thank you all for being here. And I'll let you close us out.
Well, I was going to say that I am so grateful to be here with you all, and Mary and Annalyn, and I think Sean escaped, but we knew he was going to try to escape. He has a work.
He had a big deal to go do.
And because you all sat back down so nicely, you all do get a drink, which is nice. Everyone is able to now walk over, and I look forward to these conversations continuing, the threads, the energy, the spark, and I loved just what I heard as I wandered around, and I know it's just going to keep building from here. So thank you all for being with me, and let's go get a drink.